Hi guys, my name is Jessie James. Today I want to talk about the 8th house profection year, which everyone goes through when they're 31 years old. I want to talk about my 8th house profection year experience, what it was like having a Libra profection year with Venus as a Time Lord, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I'm expecting for my 9th house profection year, which everyone goes through when they're age 32. Before I get into it though, I just want to acknowledge I moved. I'm in Virginia now. I am no longer in Los Angeles, and honestly, thank goodness, I was like so dry. I was just dry, you know? You don't even realize how dry you are. It's like a boiling the frog situation until one day there's massive fires, and then you wake up and you're like, I'm living in a tinderbox. It hasn't rained in months. And so I moved home just under a week ago. I moved my cats. I took them on the plane. It was stressful, but it was fine. And they are here. And so am I. And everyone is happy and healthy. And it has just been so much work, like, first of all, moving out of an apartment and getting rid of all of my stuff in one way or another. And it has just been such like an overwhelming experience. I don't even know. It has been stressful, but like stressful is not the first word that comes to mind. Just overwhelming, especially being neurodivergent, having autism and ADHD. Everything is just harder than it needs to be for no reason, literally at all. My executive functioning is just like, I don't know what's going on, but I did it and I'm here, and I feel bad about spending 2 weeks not doing my podcast, which is like my favorite thing in the world. I love astrology more than anything. And so I'm so happy to finally sit down and record a video again. So if you're here, I'm very happy, very, very happy to have you. Today is also a lunar eclipse in Pisces, which is definitely a reason why like my brain is so all over the place. The sun is actually conjunct my sun. Tomorrow's my birthday, my solar return. So this eclipse in my first house of Pisces is directly opposite my sun, which is definitely something. It's also my Venus return and my Mars return. The universe is just telling me like, girl, pay attention, and pay attention I will. I love you, universe. I will always listen to you. It's very nice to be in the suburbs again because there's very little light pollution and my view of the moon is unmatched. However, you may notice acorns falling from the sky and dropping on the deck and making really loud noises because they're so the velocity and physics and they bounce. It's been a lot, but here we are. So what is a profection year? Every year of your life focuses on a different house in your birth chart, and those move in sequential order. Starting when you are born, between when you are 0 and 1 years old, that is a first house profection year. The first house is all about yourself, how you see the world. When you're 0 years old, your first year of life is all about developing a sense of self. It is the foundation upon which you will build everything else. It is the first major thing that you do. When you're 1, you then enter your second house profection year. The second house is all about value and worth. You start to develop a sense of values when you're 1 years old. Then when you turn 2, you enter your third house profection year. The third house is a lot about communication. You start to learn how to speak. You start to learn how to communicate. And on around the wheel it goes until you're 11 years old, going through your first ego death in your 12th house profection year. And then you turn 12 and you begin the wheel again at 1. And I'll put up the chart here that shows you which age corresponds with which profection year. But I have been 31 for the past year, and 31 is an 8th house profection year. That means every person who's 31 goes through an 8th house profection year. However, the sign for that 8th house will be different between different people because you each have your own rising sign. As a Pisces rising, my 8th house is Libra, and the traditional ruler of Libra is Venus. Therefore, my Time Lord for my 8th house profection year was Venus. Every profection year has a Time Lord. It's the ruler of the sign that is on that house in your birth chart. So it's important to know what profection year it is. What sign is that profection year? What planet rules that profection year, aka your Time Lord? And then the next step is to identify where that planet is in your natal birth chart and understand its condition. Because if you have a Time Lord that's exalted, that's probably going to indicate more favorable circumstances for the year than a Time Lord who is in detriment or in fall. So my Venus is in Leo, so my secondary Time Lord, I'm not even sure if this is like a technical term, but I considered it so. My secondary Time Lord for the year was the Sun, the ruler of Leo. Very interestingly, there is a different technique that can tell you more about how your upcoming year is going to go called a solar return chart. And for my solar return chart for my 31st birthday, I was a Leo rising. So there was a lot of focus on Leo and on solar energy this past year. And Leo is a sign of creative self-expression. And that has definitely been a big theme for me over the past year. Now I want to talk a little bit about the 8th house in astrology. The 8th house is a very dark and underground and mysterious place. It is the natural house of Scorpio. It has several significations, but one of the significations is all about the cycle of death and rebirth and transformation. So whenever you have an 8th house profection year, you can definitely expect deep transformation. I found that this was very, very true of my 8th house profection year, and I will be sharing a lot more with you in this video. The 8th house also has to do with shared assets and other people's money, as well as debt. I'm at a place in my life where I don't have any debt, and I wasn't really going through any sort of like divorce or family will situation or anything with shared assets this year, so I didn't have that as a major theme of my year. But if you are experiencing or going through any of those things, that will probably be very heightened during an 8th house profection year. But for me, the major theme of my 8th house profection year was death, rebirth, and transformation. And 2024 for me, I have been considering a year of death, not literal death, obviously, but a death of the person who I was so that I could become someone new. When I was 30, going through my 7th house profection year, the 7th house has a lot to do with marriage and relationships and how you interact with other people. I was in a long-term relationship with a man. We moved in together 1 month after my 30th birthday. We had a horrible relationship all year, yet at the same time, I was begging him to propose to me because I just wanted to fulfill a traditional, conventional milestone so that society would accept me, an autistic girl who has never fit in and never been understood. And obviously, that's the wrong reasons, and things didn't work out for me. But I ended my 7th house profection year by breaking up with my ex-boyfriend 1 month before my birthday and then moving into my own place. The most important catalyst that I had on my 8th house profection year was starting narcissistic abuse EMDR therapy. I had already been working with a therapist for a few years, but he did not specialize in trauma or in narcissistic abuse. And after you've been with a therapist for a while, things start to feel a little bit stale. Like, it is a very good idea to switch therapists every couple of years. I very strongly learned when I started working with the new therapist, and my whole life changed. But my therapist helped me understand something very, very foundational to my transformation, which was the fact that I have been obsessed with male validation since I was 5 years old. And I thought I was boy crazy. I thought I was just so heterosexual. I was participating in hookup culture left and right, and I was obsessed with dating. I was fascinated with dating men, was not because I am just so attracted to men, but because my childhood abuse, my narcissistic abuse from growing up, and patriarchy, society, and compulsory heterosexuality had all taught me to value male validation above anything else. I was constantly in search of male validation, but I didn't actually care about the men that I was dating. I was projecting onto them. And this understanding helped me realize that I am a lesbian. And that was a big foundational part of my transformation this year, because it was the precipitating factor that allowed me to decenter men, to decenter patriarchy, and to really start doing things my way. This was the thing that really allowed me to go into my brain and understand, like, where have I been putting up false structures, like false limitations in my brain? Where has my like people pleasing and my obsession with the patriarchy and obsession with male validation caused me to act certain ways that are antithetical to my authentic self? This also happened to be on the day that Pluto moved into Aquarius, my 12th house, which is a completely different story, but it's all aligned. There's a reason that transit happened during my 8th house profection year. The next thing that really marked my 8th house profection year was the Los Angeles fires. And I was at a place where my nervous system was so haywire, and there had been so many changes in my life that I was like so worried that something bad would happen and throw a wrench in my plans and just like make me so stressed out that I couldn't handle anything. I was like obsessively worried about bed bugs to the point where I got an ant infestation in my house. And I genuinely think that I manifested it because I was so worried about bugs literally constantly. But I was just like, if I lose my job, my life is going to be over. If I have to move again, my life is going to be over. If X, Y, and Z, my life is going to be over. And so on January 7th, 2025, when a large fire broke out in Pacific Palisades, followed a few hours later by another fire in Altadena, literally next to where I lived, I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I genuinely thought my apartment was going to burn down. I had to evacuate myself and my cats to my friend's house. But in true 8th house fashion, being forced to change, being forced to leave my house with my cats and go to my friend's house and figure something out and think like, if my apartment burns down, what am I going to do? Made me very quickly get very comfortable with the idea of moving. And then when my apartment didn't burn down, I was already so set on the idea of moving. And that is what finally started me thinking about, do I even want to live in LA anymore? Because prior to this point, I had been in a 3-year relationship with my ex-boyfriend who is from LA. His family lives in LA. He never wanted to leave. So I never really sat down and thought to myself, like, why am I still here? I was working from home. I had no real ties to Los Angeles except my cats being there. And in January, I had already lived in LA for 6 years, and I had never sat down and thought, how long do I want to live here? So the fires were a very precipitating event, a transformational event in my 8th house year. The next thing that happened was at the end of March, actually the day that Neptune moved into my 2nd house Aries, I got laid off from my job that was boring and that I hated. Interestingly, almost 2 years to the day after I got laid off from my last job that was boring and that I hated. And it's so funny, especially with 8th house things, but also just like with the universe and astrology in general. As soon as I decided to move, I created a plan. I was like, I'm going to keep working my job. I worked from home until I move home with my parents. I'm going to keep working there. And then at some point, I'm going to decide to stop working and travel and figure out what I want to do next. And the universe so quickly was like, yeah, you're actually not going to do that. The universe was like, you're getting laid off in March and you're not going to get another corporate job because it doesn't feel true to your soul anymore. And you just can't do things that don't feel true to your soul because now you've gone through this whole transformational journey of being authentic to you. Of course, being a Pisces rising, eclipses are also happening in my 1st and 7th houses. And that also played into this 8th house year to say this is a very transformational year for you. You are discovering who you truly are and how you truly interact with people. 1st house Pisces ascendant, 7th house Virgo descendant. So I briefly looked for a new job and I even did like a test shift as a pastry chef at a local vegan bakery, but none of those things panned out or really felt right to me. And I like talked to the moon a lot and did my thing and worked with a lot of divination and finally came to the conclusion that I was not to get another job and that I was to strike out and start my own business, which I did in June. I launched my astrology business. And then my lease ended on August 31st. I moved home to Virginia, where I am from, where I am here in the beautiful, almost fall weather. And my 32nd birthday is tomorrow, marking the end of my 8th house Profection year. Another theme of my 8th house Profection year was isolation. LA is so big, and over time, my friends and I had moved like further and further out to various suburbs. And so suddenly I found myself being 30 minutes away from my closest friend and like an hour and 15 minutes away from my furthest friend. And so I just wasn't hanging out with people that much. I didn't have people around me. I didn't have a community. I didn't have like a bar that I could go to. I was very isolated and very lonely most of the year, but I think that was fundamentally important for my transformation and my healing. I really needed to be alone and process my trauma and process my feelings for a lot of the year. But this also tied in with Venus being my time lord. Besides the fact that Venus also rules social connection, it was like less of that, but much more of like having a very Venusian home, focusing a lot on self-care and focusing on healing myself and like making myself comfortable. My home was very beautiful and very Venusian. I had like gorgeous decorations and lots of soft blankets and no overhead lights, just like really pretty lights. It all felt very nice and Venusian, and that was a nice thing about having a Libra Profection year. But overall, looking back at the person that I was when I turned 31 and the person that I am now leaving my 31st year, the 8th house Profection year did its thing. the astrology was astrologying because I am a completely different person now than I was then, and we have nothing to thank but the 8th house profection year. One of the last things I want to talk about is the different types of houses and how that impacts your profection year cycle. There are 3 different types of houses in your birth chart. The first is angular houses. This is the first house of self, the 4th house of home, where you come from, the 7th house of how you interact with other people, and your 10th house of career and reputation. The angular houses are where big changes happen. When you have an angular house profection year, for example, when you're 30 and have your 7th house profection year, that is a year of big change, ending a 3-year relationship, moving into my own place after living with my ex-boyfriend, getting endometriosis surgery. This was all a big change. Then the houses that follow the angular houses are called the succedent houses. This is the 2nd house of money and value, the 5th house of creativity and hobbies and entrepreneurship and romance and children, the 8th house of death and rebirth and transformation and shared assets and other people's money, and the 11th house of community and friend groups and dreams and wishes. The succedent houses are where you account for the big changes that you made in the angular houses. So in my example, my big change in the 7th house year was that I broke up with my ex-boyfriend. So my 8th house year, taking accountability for that big change I made in my life, was starting EMDR therapy specifically for narcissistic abuse and healing from the trauma of being in a relationship with a narcissist who was emotionally abusive and otherwise abusive. And then the 3rd kind of house is a cadent house. So these are the 3rd house of communication, the 6th house of the work that you do every day, the 9th house of spirituality and belief systems and long distance journeys, and the 12th house of behind the scenes life, your subconscious, etc. And the cadent houses prepare you for the changes that are going to happen in the next angular house. This is the cycle. Angular house, you have a big change. Succedent house, you account for that change. Cadent house, you prepare for the next big change. Angular house, you have another big change, and so on. So while my 8th house profection year, being 31, was a succedent year where I counted for the changes, the big changes that I made in my 7th house profection year, my 9th house profection year is a cadent house. It's a year where I will probably lay a bit low, maybe not as low as this past year, but I think still pretty low, and prepare for the big changes that are to come in my 10th house profection year when I'm 33, all about my reputation and my career. And obviously, as someone who's building a business, that's something that I'm really looking forward to and really interested in seeing what's going to happen. But this year, from September 8th, 2025 to September 7th, 2026, is when I prepare for all of that. And the 9th house is all about foreign journeys, but also like mind-body practices. And I'm planning to go get my yoga teacher training in the next couple of months. So that's pretty on the nose. But also your belief systems, your morals, your values, what really drives you. And especially preparing for the 10th house of like how you help this world, how you exist in this world, what other people think of you, your career. And your career is really, what do you do with your life? You need to have your values in order because that informs what you're going to do in this world. And that's what you do during your 9th house profection year. Being a Pisces rising, my 9th house is Scorpio, and the traditional ruler of Scorpio is Mars. So Mars is going to be my time lord for this upcoming year. Interestingly, in my solar return chart for the upcoming year, I am a Scorpio rising. The universe puts these little things there because it has a plan for you. And so profection years are just one way to understand what your year is going to be about. And then major planet transits and eclipses and solar return chart and lunar return charts and zodiacal releasing are just a whole additional level to give you more detail. But profection year is a very baseline understanding of what's going to happen to you this year. You don't need to know your rising sign. You can just say, hey, I'm 31 years old, so I'm in my 8th house profection year, and not know what your 8th house is. You'll be missing out on some of the detail, but in general, 31 is a very transformational year for people because no matter your rising sign, no matter who you are, that is an 8th house profection year. Anyway, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions about profection years or the 8th house or anything astrology related, please let me know in the comments. I would be happy to answer. If you enjoyed this video, I really would appreciate if you gave it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to grow my business and I really, really appreciate and thank you for all of your support. My name is Jessie James. I am a professional astrologer, and if you're interested in booking an astrology reading with me, you can do so via my website, popstrologypod.com/readings, or directly on my bookings page, calendly.com/theastrologydiva. You can also follow me on social media. I'm on TikTok at The Astrology Diva and on Instagram at AstroJessie_. I'm also going to be running a birthday discount on astrology readings of 20% off starting tomorrow, September 8th, 2025, running for a week. So if you're interested in booking an astrology reading, this is going to be a great way to do so at a 20% discount. Anyway, I love you so much, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.